I'm Natalie Thompson, 32, standing at my mother's funeral in a simple black dress from my own clothing line. Mom never approved of my career choice. She was a perfectionist who wanted corporate success for me, not the struggling artist path she imagined I'd taken. As I stood there, feeling the weight of her absence and the scrutiny of family I'd barely seen in years, my sister Audrey leaned in close. "Couldn't you afford something better for Mom's funeral?" she whispered. "That looks like something off the discount rack." If you're watching from somewhere new today, let me know in the comments. Hit subscribe to follow my journey of turning pain into purpose, because what happened next changed everything. Growing up in an affluent Boston suburb, appearance was everything. Our house was pristine, modern architecture with clean lines and carefully curated decor that Mom refreshed seasonally. Every surface gleamed, family photos perfectly arranged to show our supposed perfection. Diana Thompson, my mother, didn't believe in doing things halfway. She was the neighborhood standard-bearer for excellence, heading charity committees and hosting dinner parties where everything from the food to the flower arrangements had to be magazine-worthy. Dad, James Thompson, worked in finance, long hours at a prestigious investment firm. He was kind but passive, letting Mom set the tone for our family. He'd wink at me when Mom wasn't looking, a silent ally who nonetheless rarely contradicted her directly. Their dynamic worked for them. He provided the financial means for her social aspirations, and she created the perfect family image he could proudly discuss with colleagues. Then there was Audrey, my sister. 3 years older, she was everything I wasn't: organized, practical, academically brilliant without seeming to try. Her room was immaculate, her schedule planned weeks in advance. Mom's pride in her was obvious from the beginning. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood, whispered when I brought home a B+ or forgot about a student council meeting. I wasn't a bad student, I just wasn't exceptional in the ways that mattered to Mom. While Audrey excelled in debate club and advanced placement classes, my mind wandered during calculus. I sketched designs in my notebook margins instead of solving equations, dreaming of fabrics and silhouettes while my teachers discussed college application strategies. My earliest memory of loving fashion came from Grandma Rose, Mom's mother. Unlike my perfectly coordinated mother, Grandma wore colorful, eccentric outfits that expressed her personality. "Clothes tell your story," she told me when I was 7, letting me try on her vintage scarves and costume jewelry. After she died when I was 12, Mom donated most of her outdated wardrobe, but I secretly kept a few pieces: a hand-beaded cardigan, a silk scarf with hand-rolled edges, studying their construction in private. High school was when the tension really started. While Audrey prepared college applications for Ivy League schools, I was staying up late creating my first real designs. I converted our basement storage room into a makeshift studio, dragging down Mom's old sewing machine that hadn't seen use in years. She discovered it one day when looking for holiday decorations. "What's all this?" she asked, surveying the sketches pinned to the walls, the fabric swatches organized by color and texture. "I'm working on my portfolio," I explained, excitement making me forget her likely reaction. "For fashion design programs." The disappointment that crossed her face stung more than anger would have. "Natalie, this is a hobby, not a career. You're smart enough for business school." That conversation repeated with increasing tension throughout my senior year. Each college brochure from design schools was met with a counteroffer: business programs, marketing degrees, practical options with real futures. Dad occasionally suggested compromises, maybe a business degree with a minor in design, but mostly stayed out of it. The breaking point came when my acceptance letter from Parsons arrived. I'd applied secretly, using birthday money from my grandmother's trust to pay the application fee. I got in, I announced at dinner, unable to contain my excitement despite knowing the storm it would bring. Mom set down her fork precisely. "And how do you plan to pay for this?" "We've been saving for you to attend your father's alma mater." "I've applied for scholarships, and I'll work part-time," I countered. "This is what I want." "What you want isn't always what's best for you," she replied. "This creative phase." "It's not a phase," I interrupted, something rarely done in our household. "This is my passion, my talent. Why can't you see that?" I see a young girl throwing away her potential on pipe dreams, Mom said coldly. Those designs you're so proud of, they'll never amount to anything in the real world. The words hit like physical blows. Audrey, home from her first year at Harvard Law, watched silently, her expression a mixture of pity and embarrassment. That night, I made my decision. I accepted the Parsons offer, applied for every scholarship available, and committed to making it without their financial support. Dad secretly slipped me a check before I left, just to get started, he said, but otherwise, I was on my own. The distance that grew between Mom and me that day stretched into years of minimal contact, obligatory holiday calls, and occasional tense visits. Audrey followed the prescribed path: Harvard Law, prestigious clerkship, position at a top Boston firm specializing in corporate law. She married Bradford, another lawyer from a good family, bought a house in the same upscale neighborhood where we grew up, and gave our parents the traditional success story they wanted. Meanwhile, I disappeared into New York, determined to prove myself without their connections or approval, the wound of Mom's dismissal driving me forward when things got tough. New York welcomed me with both opportunity and hardship. My first apartment in Brooklyn was barely more than a glorified closet, a fifth-floor walk-up with temperamental plumbing and a view of a brick wall. I pinned my designs around the tiny space, turning it into a vision board of the future I imagined. Reality set in quickly. My partial scholarship covered tuition, but nothing else. I juggled classes with waitressing at a cafe near campus and weekend shifts at a boutique in Soho. The boutique job paid less, but offered something more valuable: exposure to the industry. I studied how customers interacted with garments, what they looked for in construction, what made them put something back on the rack versus take it to the register. Sleep became a luxury. After closing the cafe at 10 p.m., I'd return to my apartment and work on assignments until 2 or 3 in the morning, then wake up for 8 a.m. classes. My roommate Zoe, a dance major with an equally grueling schedule, became my first true friend in the city. We sustained each other with coffee, encouragement, and occasional crying sessions when everything felt impossible. You have something special, she'd insist when I doubted myself. Mom always says cream rises. Zoe's mother, unlike mine, believed in her daughter's artistic pursuits. Sometimes I'd visit their Queens apartment for Sunday dinners, soaking in the warmth of a family that celebrated creativity rather than questioned it. My breakthrough came during junior year when Miranda Bailey visited our design studio. A veteran designer known for her meticulous construction and business acumen, Miranda rarely took interest in students. But as she walked through our workspace, she stopped at my station, examining the blazer I was constructing. "Interesting choice," she commented, fingers running along my unconventional seaming. "You're thinking about how it moves on a real body, not just a mannequin." That 10-minute conversation changed everything. Miranda offered me an internship that summer, which meant turning down a higher-paying restaurant job. I lived on ramen and sample sale findings for months, but the experience was invaluable. Miranda taught me about more than design. She showed me how the business worked, the importance of production relationships, how to maintain quality while managing costs. "Talent is common," she told me bluntly. "Talent plus perseverance is rare. That's your advantage. You're hungry in ways these trust fund designers aren't." After graduation, Miranda connected me with a small production house in the garment district willing to make limited runs of my designs. I worked from my apartment, now shared with 2 other struggling creatives, creating a capsule collection of 5 pieces. Versatile items that could transition from work to evening with simple styling changes. The business name came naturally: Thompson Essentials. Using my family name was both a connection to my roots and a private declaration of my identity. I never considered using Natalie Thompson as the brand name, partly because I wasn't ready for that level of personal exposure, but mostly because I wanted success or failure to be about the work itself, not my story. My first season, I sold exactly 27 pieces through a friend's boutique in Brooklyn. The second season, that number grew to 63. By year 2, 3 boutiques carried my line, and a small write-up in a local fashion blog brought my first wholesale inquiry. I lived on hope and cash flow projections, reinvesting every dollar of profit back into the business. When a pipe burst in my apartment, ruining fabric for an upcoming collection, I cried for exactly 20 minutes before calling every contact I had to source replacement materials at discounted prices. The irony wasn't lost on me. In running my own business, I was using all the practical skills Mom thought I'd learn in business school. I tracked inventory on elaborate spreadsheets, negotiated with suppliers, built marketing plans, and managed production timelines with military precision. The creative work happened in stolen moments between the business demands. Year 4 brought the first major turning point. A buyer from a prestigious department store discovered my collection at a trade show and placed an order that doubled my annual revenue overnight. Suddenly, I needed real production capacity, office space, and my first employees. The learning curve was steep and terrifying. "You should tell your family," Zoe suggested over celebratory drinks after I signed the department store contract. "They'd be proud." I considered it briefly before shaking my head. "Not yet. I want to be established enough that it doesn't seem like a fluke." The truth was more complicated. Part of me feared Mom would somehow diminish this achievement, call it lucky or temporary. Another part, the wounded daughter still seeking approval, wanted to be so undeniably successful that she'd have to admit she'd been wrong about me. And perhaps the most painful truth, I'd grown accustomed to building my life without them and wasn't sure how to bridge that gap. By year 6, Thompson Essentials had grown beyond my wildest projections. We occupied a light-filled studio space in Chelsea with a team of 30 employees. Our pieces sold in major retailers across the country and had been featured in Vogue, Elle, and Harper's Bazaar. Celebrities had been photographed wearing my designs, creating viral moments that crashed our website twice. The brand's ethos, practical luxury with clean lines and unexpected details, resonated with professional women looking for wardrobes that adapted to their complex lives. I'd found my niche creating pieces that looked effortless, but were engineered to perform, much like the facade of effortless perfection I'd grown up with. Our latest milestone came just 2 weeks before Mom's diagnosis, an exclusive collaboration with Nordstrom projected to generate $15 million in sales. The night of the launch party, standing in a room filled with industry leaders who now knew my name, I felt a momentary urge to call home. Instead, I texted Zoe, "We did it." Home remained a complicated concept. My apartment in the West Village, filled with art from friends and furniture I'd carefully selected, felt like mine in ways my childhood bedroom never had. I'd built a chosen family of fellow creatives, entrepreneurs, and misfits who understood the path I'd taken. And yet, when the phone rang that March morning with Dad's number on the screen, everything I'd built suddenly felt incomplete. "Your mother's been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer." Dad's voice cracked slightly, the controlled composure he'd maintained throughout my childhood finally showing cracks. "Stage 4. They're saying 6 months, maybe a year with treatment." The world tilted on its axis. Despite our difficult relationship, Mom had always seemed indestructible, a force of nature too determined to be felled by something as chaotic as cancer cells. I sat down on my office couch, design sketches for next season's collection scattered across the coffee table. "I'm coming up this weekend," I said automatically, already mentally rearranging meetings and deadlines. "She'd like that," Dad replied, sounding surprised and relieved. "She may not say it, but she would." The train ride to Boston gave me time to prepare mentally. 6 years had passed since my last visit home, though we'd seen each other briefly at Audrey's wedding 4 years ago. Our communication had been limited to occasional phone calls on holidays and birthdays, each interaction polite but distant, neither of us knowing how to close the gap that had formed. The house looked exactly the same, meticulously maintained colonial with perfectly trimmed hedges and seasonal flowers and coordinated planters. Mom had always said a home's exterior set expectations for what lay inside. Inside, however, subtle changes marked the intrusion of illness: a hospital bed in the downstairs guest room, prescription bottles lined up on the kitchen counter, a stack of medical paperwork on Dad's desk. Mom sat in her favorite chair by the window, wrapped in a cashmere throw despite the warm spring day. She'd lost weight, her cheekbones more prominent than I remembered, but her hair was still perfectly styled, makeup carefully applied. "Natalie," she said, her voice strong despite her frail appearance. "You didn't need to come all this way." "Of course I did," I replied, the familiar tension already rebuilding between us. I leaned down to kiss her cheek, catching the familiar scent of Chanel No. 5 mixed with something medicinal. Audrey arrived moments later with a casserole and fresh flowers, efficiency in motion as she reorganized the refrigerator to accommodate the meal and arranged the blooms in Mom's preferred vase without being asked. She hugged me briefly, her expensive perfume enveloping me. "Good of you to make it," she said, her tone suggesting surprise. "I wasn't sure you could get away from your work." The slight pause before work carried years of assumptions that my career was still precarious, that I was still the family's bohemian black sheep chasing impractical dreams. "I have a good team," I replied simply, choosing not to elaborate. Something held me back from revealing my success, perhaps the same instinct that makes you hesitate before showing a wound that's finally healed. That first visit established patterns that would continue throughout Mom's illness. Audrey managed the practical aspects, organizing medical information in color-coded folders, creating schedules for Dad to ensure Mom took her medications correctly, researching experimental treatments and second opinions. I found other ways to help, sitting with Mom during chemotherapy sessions when Audrey had court appearances, bringing audiobooks and podcasts to distract her from the nausea, learning to prepare the bland foods that didn't aggravate her symptoms. During these quieter moments, I occasionally caught glimpses of a different mother than the one I'd grown up with. Cancer stripped away some of her perfect facade, revealing vulnerability she'd never shown us before. "I always wanted to travel more," she confessed during one treatment session, the drugs making her unusually reflective. "Your father and I talked about taking a year to see Europe when we retired." "You still could. After you recover," I suggested, though we both recognized the hollow optimism in my words. She smiled faintly. "Perhaps." Then, after a long pause, "I saw a woman wearing a beautiful jacket in the waiting room last week. It reminded me of your sketches." My heart leapt at this rare acknowledgement of my passion, but before I could respond, she continued, "Audrey's making partner next year. The youngest female partner in the firm's history." And just like that, we were back on familiar ground, Audrey's conventional achievements the safer topic. During the 8 months of Mom's illness, these moments of almost connection, repeated brief openings quickly closed, opportunities for deeper understanding that neither of us quite knew how to grasp. I kept waiting for her to ask about my work, my life in New York, to show genuine interest in who I'd become. That moment never came. Audrey, meanwhile, made subtle digs about my artistic lifestyle when opportunities arose. "Must be nice having such flexible work," she commented when I mentioned extending my stay after a particularly rough round of treatment for Mom. The irony that I was running a multimillion-dollar company with more employees than her law firm department was lost on her, and I lacked the energy to correct her assumptions. As Mom's condition deteriorated, the family dynamics intensified. Dad retreated into practical caregiving, his emotions buried beneath lists of medications and appointment times. Audrey micromanaged everything with increasing intensity, her way of controlling the uncontrollable. I found myself playing peacekeeper, a new role in our family system. The final weeks came more quickly than the doctors had projected. Mom's decline accelerated suddenly, her body finally surrendering to the disease that had been consuming it from within. We gathered in her bedroom, now transformed into a hospice space with medical equipment partially hidden by her favorite decorative throws and pillows, maintaining appearances until the end. In her semi-conscious state, Mom drifted between clarity and confusion. During one lucid moment, she squeezed Audrey's hand and whispered, "I'm so proud of everything you've accomplished." I sat on her other side, holding her increasingly frail hand, waiting for words that might bridge our complicated relationship. Her eyes found mine, something unreadable in their depths. "Natalie," she said softly, her voice barely audible. I leaned closer. "I'm here, Mom." She seemed to struggle with what she wanted to say, her breathing labored. "You always had your own way," she finally managed, before drifting back into unresponsiveness. Were those words of recognition? Criticism? Acceptance? I would never know. Mom passed away the following morning with Dad by her side, while Audrey and I had stepped out to get coffee. The timing seemed fitting somehow. Diana Thompson had always maintained her privacy, keeping certain parts of herself hidden even from those closest to her. She left this world on her own terms, just as she had lived in it. The complicated grief that followed her death was unlike anything I'd experienced, a tangle of sadness, regret, anger, and relief that defied simple categorization. As we made funeral arrangements, I realized with a hollow ache that the opportunity for reconciliation or understanding had passed. Whatever Mom had thought of my choices, my life, my success, those thoughts had died with her. The funeral took place on a Tuesday, overcast but not raining, as if the weather itself was showing appropriate restraint. The church where Mom had attended services every Sunday was filled with Boston's social elite, a testament to her extensive community connections. I dressed carefully that morning in my hotel room, selecting a piece from my most recent collection. A structured black dress with subtle architectural details at the shoulders and a precise fit that looked simple but had required 17 pattern revisions to perfect. It represented everything I'd learned about design over the years. Elegance through careful engineering rather than obvious embellishment. Mom might have appreciated the craftsmanship had she known to look for it. The service itself was a blur of hymns and eulogies. Dad spoke briefly, his grief evident in the pauses between carefully chosen words. Audrey delivered a polished tribute highlighting Mom's charitable work and community leadership. I hadn't been asked to speak, which was both a relief and another small wound to add to the collection. As we stood receiving condolences afterward, I noticed something that would have amused me under different circumstances. At least a dozen women in attendance wore pieces from Thompson Essentials collections, the distinctive seaming of our blazers, the unique drape of our dresses recognizable to my trained eye. My designs had infiltrated Mom's social circle without anyone, including Mom, realizing the connection. "Couldn't you afford something better for Mom's funeral?" Audrey whispered during a brief lull in the receiving line. "That looks like something off the discount rack." I bit the inside of my cheek, tasting blood. Years of her casual dismissals could no longer be excused by Mom's influence. At 35, Audrey was making these choices entirely on her own. "Not now," I murmured, forcing a somber smile as Mom's bridge partner approached with sympathetic murmurs. The real confrontation came later at the reception held at my parents' house. Caterers circulated with trays of Mom's favorite hors d'oeuvres while conversations shifted from appropriately mournful to the normal social networking that occurred whenever this crowd gathered. I overheard Audrey in the dining room, surrounded by her circle of equally successful friends from prep school and Harvard. "Natalie's still doing her fashion thing in New York," she was saying, her voice carrying that particular tone of affectionate condescension. Mom worried about her, of course. Living in that dangerous city, no real career stability. But that's Natalie, always the dreamer. My hand tightened around my water glass as I stood frozen in the hallway, invisible to the group around my sister. "At least she came home for the important things," Audrey continued. "Though you'd think she could have made an effort with her appearance. That dress she's wearing looks like something you'd find on a clearance rack at TJ Maxx." The group tittered politely, and something inside me finally snapped. 6 years of building a successful business while being dismissed by my family, 8 months of caretaking while swallowing Audrey's condescension, and a lifetime of being measured against impossible standards crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. I stepped into the room, my expression calm despite the emotion churning beneath the surface. "Is there something wrong with my dress, Audrey?" The conversation halted abruptly as the group turned toward me. Audrey had the grace to look momentarily embarrassed before recovering her composure. "I was just saying that Mom would have wanted us to look our best today," she replied smoothly. "You know how she felt about presentation." "Yes, I'm very familiar with Mom's standards," I said, my voice steady. "I'm curious though, what specifically do you find lacking about this dress?" Audrey glanced at her friends, clearly wishing I would follow our family tradition of handling disagreements in private. "It's just rather plain, isn't it? And the fabric doesn't hang quite right." One of her friends, Rebecca Harrison, now a neurosurgeon married to old Boston money, shifted uncomfortably. Actually, I think it's quite elegant, she offered, probably more from social discomfort than genuine defense of my attire. Thank you, Rebecca, I replied, noticing with professional interest that she was wearing a Thompson Essentials blouse from 2 seasons ago. I'm rather fond of it myself. I just bought this amazing dress from that new designer everyone's talking about, Thompson Essentials, another woman in the group interjected, clearly hoping to change the subject. Their construction is impeccable. Worth every penny. I watched Audrey's face, waiting for the moment. It didn't come. The fabric of this dress is Italian wool crepe, I said conversationally. It was specially developed to maintain structure while allowing movement. The seaming is reinforced with a technique I adapted from 1950s couture methods, which is why it hangs the way it does. Audrey rolled her eyes slightly. Since when are you an expert on fabric manufacturing? The moment had arrived. I took a deliberate breath before speaking clearly enough for everyone to hear. Since I founded Thompson Essentials 6 years ago. That's my company. I designed this dress and the blouse Rebecca is wearing. The silence that followed was absolute. Audrey's expression shifted from disbelief to confusion as she processed my words. Around us, several guests who had been half listening to nearby conversations turned to stare. That's not possible, Audrey finally said, her voice lacking its usual confidence. Thompson Essentials is a major brand. They're in Nordstrom and Saks. Yes, we are, I confirmed calmly. Our new exclusive line launches at Nordstrom next month, actually. Rebecca was already pulling out her phone, typing quickly. Oh my God, she breathed, turning the screen toward the group. It's true. Natalie Thompson, founder and creative director. My college graduation photo smiled back from the company website's About page, alongside our mission statement about functional luxury for modern women. The surreal moment of my professional and personal worlds colliding left me feeling oddly detached, as though I were watching the scene unfold from a distance. Dad appeared at the edge of the group, his expression bewildered. What's happening? Apparently, Audrey said, her voice tight, Natalie has been hiding a rather significant secret from the family. The crowd around us had grown, funeral guests drawn by the unusual tension. Friends of Mom's, business associates of Dad's, extended family, all watching this unexpected drama unfold at what should have been a dignified memorial reception. Is this true? Dad asked, looking directly at me. You own Thompson Essentials? Yes, I said simply. I started it after design school. It's grown quite a bit over the past few years. Why would you keep this secret? Audrey demanded, color high in her cheeks. To make us look bad? So you could have this big reveal and embarrass us at Mom's funeral. I didn't plan any reveal, I replied, keeping my voice level. I've built my business quietly because that's how I preferred to work. Not everything is about you or this family, Audrey. Dad was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret, shock certainly, but something else too. Grief? Regret? Pride? I think I need a drink, he said finally, turning toward his study where the real liquor was kept, away from the watered-down reception offerings. I followed him, aware of the murmurs rising behind us. Inside the book-lined room that had always been Dad's sanctuary, he poured 2 fingers of scotch into crystal tumblers with shaking hands. I had no idea, he said, handing me one. All these years, we thought you were struggling, I supplied. Just getting by? That was a convenient assumption that no one ever bothered to question. He flinched at my tone. We should have asked more questions. Yes, I agreed. You should have. We sipped in silence for a moment before he spoke again. Your mother knew. The scotch burned in my throat as I inhaled sharply. What? Dad moved to his desk, opening the bottom drawer where he kept important papers. About 3 years ago, she saw a magazine article about up-and-coming designers. Your picture wasn't included, but the description of the Thompson Essentials founder. A young woman from Boston who studied at Parsons made her suspicious. He withdrew a folder and handed it to me. Inside were carefully clipped magazine articles about Thompson Essentials, printouts of online features, even a women's wear daily profile I'd done last year where I'd finally allowed my photo to be published. She followed your career, Dad said softly. She never said anything because she was stubborn, I finished for him. And admitting she was wrong wasn't in her skill set. Something like that, he acknowledged with a sad smile. There's more. He led me upstairs to the master bedroom, now painfully neat without the usual signs of Mom's occupancy, no cream being returned to the wrong shelf, no book left open on the nightstand. Opening her closet, he reached past her precisely arranged clothes to a section in the back that I'd never seen before. She asked me not to donate these, he explained, pulling out a garment bag. Said they were special. Inside the bag were 5 pieces from various Thompson Essentials collections, a blazer from our first department store line, a dress from 3 seasons ago, a blouse from our most recent collection. Each item still had its tags attached. She bought them, I whispered, running my fingers over the familiar fabrics. But never wore them. There's a note, Dad said, pointing to an envelope pinned to the dress. My hands trembled as I opened it, recognizing Mom's precise handwriting. My daughter's work. I was wrong. 5 words that contained volumes. Had she written this recently, knowing her time was limited? Or had it been a private admission she never intended me to see? The date on the note, nearly 2 years ago, suggested the latter. Tears I hadn't allowed myself to shed during the funeral or the service finally spilled over. All the years of seeking validation, of working to prove myself and Mom had known. Had recognized my success, but remained trapped in the pattern of silence we'd established. A soft knock interrupted the moment. Audrey stood in the doorway, her perfect composure visibly cracking. Everyone's talking downstairs, she said, her voice uncharacteristically small. Cousin Michelle is showing people your website on her phone. Apparently, 3 different women are wearing your designs at Mom's funeral without realizing it. The absurdity of the situation hit us simultaneously, and a bizarre laugh escaped me. Mom would have hated that kind of social faux pas. Audrey's lips twitched. 3 women in the same outfit was her worst nightmare. Her gaze fell on the open garment bag, the note still in my hand. What's that? Mom's secret collection, Dad explained. She followed Natalie's career for years. Audrey stepped closer, examining the clothes with new interest. These are actually beautiful, she admitted, touching the sleeve of the blazer. I had no idea you were capable of. She trailed off, realizing how the words sounded. Creating a multimillion-dollar company. I finished for her. Designing clothes elegant enough for your friends to spend their husband's money on? Being successful without following Mom and Dad's plan? She flinched. I deserved that. You did, I agreed, but without the anger I'd carried for so long. Seeing Mom's private acknowledgement of my work had shifted something fundamental. But I'm tired of deserving and receiving and withholding. Aren't you? Audrey's carefully maintained composure finally broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks, ruining her perfect makeup. I was so jealous of you, she confessed, the words seeming to surprise even her. You got to leave, to build something that was just yours. Do you know what it's like being the one who stays? Who does everything right? Who keeps carrying the weight of expectations? No, I said honestly. Just like you don't know what it's like being the disappointment, the one who's never quite enough. Dad looked between us, these daughters he clearly didn't fully know, and cleared his throat. I think your mother would say this conversation is overdue but inappropriate for a funeral reception. He was right, it was exactly what Mom would have said, prioritizing propriety over emotional honesty. But Mom wasn't here to maintain those boundaries anymore. The reception can wait, I decided, sitting on the edge of the bed that had been my parents' for 38 years. I think we have some catching up to do. Dad excused himself to manage the dwindling reception downstairs, leaving Audrey and me alone in our parents' bedroom surrounded by the evidence of Mom's secret pride in my work. We sat in awkward silence for several moments, neither knowing quite where to begin after years of surface-level interaction. I thought you were waiting tables and scraping by, Audrey finally said. That's what Mom and Dad always implied. They didn't know any different, I replied, running my fingers over the lapel of one of my designs that Mom had purchased. I never corrected their assumptions. But why? Audrey pressed. You've clearly been successful for years. Why not tell us? I considered the question, trying to articulate feelings I'd never fully examined. At first, it was because I wasn't sure I would succeed. I didn't want to invite more disappointment if I failed. And later, she prompted. Later. I guess I was waiting for someone to ask. To show genuine interest in my life, rather than just assuming. The admission felt both petty and profound simultaneously. And maybe I needed to prove to myself that I could do it without the family name or connections. Audrey nodded slowly. I can understand that. She hesitated before adding, I've never had that luxury, separating myself from the family identity. Everyone in Boston legal circles knows I'm James and Diana Thompson's daughter. Doors opened because of that, but it also meant I was constantly being measured against their expectations. The golden child has her own burdens, I observed, not unkindly. Don't get me wrong, Audrey clarified. I love what I do. But sometimes I wonder what I might have chosen if the path hadn't been so clearly marked from the beginning. This vulnerability from my perpetually composed sister was new territory. I thought of all the times I'd envied her certainty, her clear direction, never considering it might be a constraint rather than a privilege. Was law always your dream? I asked, realizing I'd never actually inquired about her aspirations. A flicker of something regret, perhaps, crossed her face. I enjoyed debate in high school, and I'm good at the analytical thinking. But there was a time I thought about medical school. I was fascinated by neuroscience. I had no idea, I admitted. Mom thought medicine would require too many years of training before establishing a career. She was concerned about work-life balance when I eventually wanted a family. Audrey's smile was tinged with irony. Meanwhile, I bill more hours than most surgeons work. We spent the next hour trading stories, filling in the gaps of our adult lives that had only been sketched in holiday phone calls and brief visits. I shared the early struggles of building my business, sleeping on a friend's couch when I couldn't make rent, the critical supplier who quit just before a major delivery, the exhilaration of seeing my designs in a magazine for the first time. Audrey spoke of the pressures of being a woman in her firm, the political navigation required, her ambivalence about having children despite family expectations. Bradford wants kids yesterday, she confessed. I keep saying after making partner, but now that's happening and I'm still not sure. As the afternoon faded into evening, Dad rejoined us, bringing a tray with sandwiches the caterers had left behind. The last guests are gone, he informed us. Your Aunt Catherine insisted on boxing up all the leftover food. I believe we now have enough ham to survive nuclear winter. The mundane comment, so typically Dad, broke the emotional tension. We laughed, creating a moment of unexpected lightness in a day defined by grief and revelations. I found something else of your mother's, Dad said, pulling a leather-bound journal from his pocket. I didn't know she kept this. He handed it to me, and I opened it to discover fabric swatches carefully pasted onto the pages, with notes in Mom's precise handwriting. Dates, observations about texture and drape, even small sketches of garment details. She studied textile design in college, Dad explained, noticing our confusion. Before she switched to business administration. I'd almost forgotten. Mom was a designer. I asked, stunned by this revelation. Not professionally. It was more of a serious hobby. Her father. Your grandfather didn't consider it a proper career for a Thompson. Sound familiar? He smiled sadly. She used to make her own clothes when we were first married. Stopped when Audrey was born. Said she didn't have time anymore. The journal trembled in my hands, tangible evidence of a shared passion I'd never known about, a potential connection that remained unexplored in life. Mom's criticism of my career choice took on new dimensions. Had she been protecting me from her own disappointment? Projecting her regrets? Or simply ensuring I wouldn't make what she perceived as her mistakes? She kept so many secrets, Audrey murmured, looking through Mom's collection of my designs. Even from us. Your mother believed in appropriate boundaries, Dad said, his tone suggesting he hadn't always agreed. She thought parents should present a united, confident front. Doubts and regrets weren't for sharing. We continued exploring Mom's hidden interests, finding sketches tucked into art books in the library, a collection of vintage fashion magazines stored in archival boxes in the attic. Each discovery painted a more complex portrait of the woman who had raised us, a woman with creative passions she had channeled into community projects and home decoration when her original dreams were deferred. As the evening deepened, Audrey tentatively tried on one of my designs, a navy blazer with subtle architectural details that Mom had purchased but never worn. It fit her perfectly, the structured shoulders emphasizing her height. "It's beautiful," she admitted, examining the garment in Mom's full-length mirror. "The craftsmanship is really exceptional." "It would look great with those gray trousers you wore to dinner last Christmas," I suggested, professional instincts engaging despite the unusual circumstances. For the first time since childhood, we connected as sisters rather than rivals, Audrey asking genuine questions about my design process, me listening with new respect to her insights about her legal cases. Dad watched us with a mixture of grief and hope, occasionally offering anecdotes about Mom that revealed sides of her we had never fully known. "She would be happy about this," he said as midnight approached. "The two of you talking. Really talking." "Would she?" Audrey questioned. "She seemed to prefer when everything was kept in its proper place, including emotions." "That was her public face," Dad corrected gently. "Privately, she worried about the distance between you girls, especially after her diagnosis." The revelation that Mom had recognized and regretted our estrangement added another layer to my complicated grief. So many missed opportunities for connection, so many words left unspoken on all sides. "I'd like to do something," I said suddenly, the idea forming as I spoke. "A scholarship in Mom's name. For young designers who don't have family support or connections." "The Natalie Thompson Design Scholarship," Audrey suggested. "Supporting creativity and practicality." She smiled slightly. She'd hate the sentimentality but love the prestige. She would insist on being involved in the selection process, Dad added, his eyes crinkling with fond remembrance. As we planned the details of this tribute, I felt a shift in our family dynamic, the beginning of something new built on honest recognition of the past. The weight of unspoken judgments and misunderstandings didn't disappear entirely, but it lightened enough to allow movement, growth, possibility. That night, sleeping in my childhood bedroom for the first time in years, I dreamt of Mom wearing one of my designs, walking confidently through a garden that somehow combined the structured elegance of her aesthetic with the creative freedom of mine. She didn't speak, but her expression held approval, pride, and a touch of wry acknowledgement, as if to say, "We're more alike than either of us admitted." I woke with tears on my cheeks, but a strange sense of peace in my heart. 6 months after Mom's funeral, the Thompson family gathered again, this time in my spacious loft apartment in New York City's West Village. The space reflected my aesthetic, clean lines and functional luxury softened by personal touches, artwork from travels, photographs of friends, fabric swatches pinned to inspiration boards in my home studio. Dad arrived first, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in years. Retirement suited him, as did the silver scruff he'd allowed to grow since Mom's passing. She would have insisted he maintain his clean-shaven corporate appearance, but this slightly rumpled version of James Thompson seemed more authentic somehow. "Nice tie," I commented, noticing the subtle pattern in the silk. He straightened it proudly. "From your men's collection. My golf buddies keep asking where I got it." The casual mention of my work, acknowledged, appreciated, still gave me a small thrill. How strange that such simple recognition could mean so much after its long absence. Audrey and Bradford arrived next, bringing an expensive bottle of wine and news. Audrey had made a significant career change, moving from her high-pressure firm to a position teaching law at Boston University. "I'm still practicing part-time with select clients," she explained as we prepared dinner together, another new development in our relationship. "But I'm finding I love teaching the next generation more than I expected." Mom would have opinions about that decision, I observed, slicing vegetables for the salad. Undoubtedly, Audrey agreed with a wry smile. "But I think Dad got it right at the funeral when he said she ultimately wanted us to be fulfilled. She just had very specific ideas about what that should look like." The evening unfolded with a relaxed warmth that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. Bradford, freed from the tension that had always characterized family gatherings, revealed himself to be surprisingly funny. Dad shared stories of his travels, a safari in Tanzania, a cooking class in Thailand, adventures he'd postponed during decades of corporate life. After dinner, we moved to the topic that had brought us together, the formal launch of the Diana Thompson Design Scholarship, which would be announced the following week at a fashion industry event. The foundation board loved the proposal, I reported, pulling up the presentation on my laptop. We've secured enough funding for 5 scholars annually, with full tuition plus living stipends. I've drafted the legal framework, Audrey added. The selection criteria balance creative promise with demonstrated financial need. We had each contributed our professional strengths to this tribute, my industry connections and understanding of design education, Audrey's legal expertise, Dad's financial acumen. Working together on this project had created new patterns of interaction, ones based on mutual respect rather than old family dynamics. Your mother would be proud, Dad said simply. Not just of the scholarship, but of you two finding your way back to being sisters. The observation hung in the air, acknowledging the journey we'd navigated these past months. Weekly phone calls, occasional weekend visits, honest conversations that sometimes veered into uncomfortable territory, but ultimately strengthened our understanding of each other. Grief, I had discovered, followed no linear path. Some days the loss felt as fresh as the moment Dad had called with news of Mom's diagnosis. Other times, unexpected memories brought comfort rather than pain. Mom's methodical approach to holiday decorating, her insistence on proper thank you notes, the rare occasions when her carefully maintained composure cracked to reveal genuine delight. I'm using some of her fabric samples in my new collection, I revealed, leading them to my studio area. We found all those swatches in her journal, remember? I had them digitally scanned and recreated by a mill in Italy. The resulting textiles combined Mom's traditional sensibility with my contemporary aesthetic, classic patterns subtly reimagined with modern techniques. I'd named the collection Diana, my first design tribute with a personal connection. She'd pretend to be embarrassed, but secretly love it, Audrey said, examining the samples. Exactly, I agreed. She'd say it was unnecessary sentimentality while telling all her friends. We laughed together, this shared understanding of Mom's complexities a new kind of connection between us. Later, as Dad and Bradford discussed baseball on the terrace, Audrey helped me clear the dessert dishes. I've been seeing a therapist, she confided, her voice low, trying to unpack some of my perfectionism and need for control. That's brave, I said sincerely. How's it going? Uncomfortable. She smiled ruefully. Turns out I've been using achievement as a substitute for actual self-worth my entire life. Who knew? Shocking, I teased gently. The therapist suggested Mom probably did the same thing, Audrey continued, more serious now. Her impossible standards were likely a reflection of her own insecurities. It doesn't excuse how she sometimes made us feel, but it helps explain it. I considered this perspective, thinking of Mom's abandoned design aspirations, her father's disapproval, her channeling of creative energy into socially acceptable outlets like charity committees and home decoration. We all have our armor, I acknowledged. Mine was distance. Yours was achievement. Hers was perfection. And none of it actually protected us from getting hurt, Audrey concluded. This understanding, that our defenses often become our prisons, felt like the most valuable inheritance Mom had unintentionally left us. The recognition freed us to make different choices, to prioritize authenticity over appearance, connection over protection. The Diana Thompson Design Scholarship launched the following week to industry acclaim. Standing at the podium describing Mom's previously unknown passion for textiles and design, I felt her presence in a way I hadn't since her death, not as the critical voice that had once driven me away from Boston, but as a complex woman whose life contained both fulfilled dreams and abandoned ones. In the months that followed, our family continued its careful reconstruction. Dad started dating again, a widow he'd met in his travel group, approaching this new relationship with a vulnerability he'd rarely shown with Mom. Audrey and Bradford decided against children, a choice made from authentic preference rather than career considerations. I expanded Thompson Essentials into new markets while maintaining the quality and integrity that had become our hallmark. Life moved forward, as it inevitably does. The acute pain of loss gradually transformed into something more manageable, a bittersweet awareness that shaped our perspectives without overwhelming them. We carried Mom with us in both the traits we'd inherited and the conscious decisions to choose different paths. On the anniversary of her death, I stood alone in my studio surrounded by the completed Diana collection. The pieces represented everything I'd learned about design over the years, but also everything I'd come to understand about family, about the complicated ways we express love, about the possibility of finding connection even after loss. I realized that true success meant little without people to share it with, people who knew not just your accomplishments, but your struggles, who recognized the journey behind the end result. The relationships I'd rebuilt with Dad and Audrey, complex and imperfect as they remained, had become as important to me as the business I'd built. Mom had never witnessed my professional success in life, never acknowledged it directly. But somehow I believed she knew. The carefully collected clippings, the purchased designs she never wore, the private note of admission, these were her way of bridging the gap when words failed her. In the end, perhaps that was the most important lesson, that love sometimes expresses itself imperfectly, through silence and distance, as well as through words and presence. That recognition can come in unexpected forms. That it's never too late to seek understanding, even if the conversation happens in ways you never anticipated. If there's something this experience has taught me, it's that assumptions can build walls that take years to dismantle. What relationships in your life might benefit from honest conversation rather than comfortable distance? What assumptions might you be making about the people closest to you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to follow more of these reflections on family, identity, and the complicated ways we express love. Thank you for sharing this journey with me, and remember, sometimes the most meaningful connections begin when we have the courage to reveal our authentic selves, even when it feels vulnerable to do so.